Hello, listeners, and welcome to the show. This is Sam Abrika, the CEO of Money, an AI financial planner designed to help you build financial freedom. Do you want to understand what's going on with the global economy, the stimulus package, and the inflation? Today, we're going to talk about economics with Jessica Wallace. She's an economist working in the US government. She's in charge of implementing the stimulus package and will share her experience of what's going on behind the scenes. Hi, Jessica. Glad to have you today to talk a bit about macroeconomics.
Yes, I'm so excited. I go by the finance doctor, and I'm here to bring some awareness to the US dollar, effects of inflation, and just to discuss what's going on right now with COVID and capitalism. So, yeah, let's get into some macroeconomics.
And there are a lot of things going on. I think most people are not very familiar with all these terms like inflation and the stimulus package and how it's working, but they can see that it will impact them like quite severely. What's going on at the moment with the stimulus package and why is it creating inflation?
Yes, so inflation right now is at a little over 5% for the US dollar. Inflation is truly based on the value of the dollar. So the value of the dollar is based on gross domestic product, meaning that the actual value of products that are sent and received are getting lowered. So regardless of how much it costs to produce these products, it is actually costing more to sell the product than it is to produce the product. So that leads to inflation.
Right. And inflation is not equal across all products. There are some sectors that are more affected than others. For example, energy is increasing, like car is increasing, or semiconductors are super expensive at the moment because there is such a bottleneck in the manufacturing.
Yes, so COVID has actually affected trade. And when trade is affected, that means that it's more expensive to produce the products. So, for instance, if say the car industry, if it is more expensive to produce some of the mechanics that go into the vehicles, then of course the value of the vehicle, even though it might be the same, it might cost more to produce that item. So when it costs more to produce the item due to COVID in lack of supply, then it creates an inflation situation where the value of the vehicle is now lower than the price.
And I think there are two drivers behind the inflation. One is the manufacturing, so the production has been severely impacted by COVID. The lot of factories, especially in Asia, that where all the manufacturing of the semiconductors are hyper concentrated, were just disrupted for COVID, for lockdown, for typhoon, for like everything happened at the same time. And also the demand of this product has increased because like people were in lockdown, and it creates an imbalance between like the demand and the supply. So the prices are going up and sometimes like crazy. For example, if you want nowadays to buy like semiconductors, chips, processors, they're just out of stock. Some of them have been out of stock for 1 year and they're sold on the black market at 2 times, 3 times, sometimes I've even seen 4 times the retail price.
Yes, and that's where we truly get into COVID relief. So many businesses, they can't afford to be out of stock. And a lot of them go down and go under. So to avoid that, a stimulus package has been released in various countries, including the United States, to keep those businesses running. So while they go months, weeks, and now going into years of not being able to keep up with their demand and their supply, they're able to receive funds from the US government to continue their operations until they're able to get back up and running on the same speed prior to COVID. So right now, the federal government's debt is at about $6.6 trillion. However, $1.9 trillion, has already been spent due to COVID. So it's projected that about 20% of the deficit, of the US deficit, is going to attribute to COVID. And that has occurred in the past 5, 10 years as compared to the entire history of the United States. So, right now, we are in one of the worst times for the United States because the majority of the money that's being spent for the US deficit is occurring right now in our lifetime. So, we're seeing history being made right now with trillions of dollars being spent on COVID relief.
Can you give us an overview of that relief or stimulus package? Who is it for? Is it only for companies? Is it also for people? And how much does it
Yes.
cost?
So the current stimulus package is at about $1.9 trillion. So that's being broken up to support direct people, US citizens and businesses. So just to break down the numbers, it's direct payments, meaning that they're going directly to US citizens. So we've seen that with getting some people have gotten $1,200, over the course of the past year. Also, there's jobless assistance. So there's unemployment that has been spent as well for those who have lost their jobs due to COVID. There are support for parents, meaning that up to $3,600 per household is being shoveled out per family. There's money for COVID-19 and vaccinations that's also being spent. There's funds that are being spent for reopening schools because many schools had to get shut down and they are state funded. So they have received funds from the government. Business support, about $25 billion has been spent to support businesses and to keep them open. And so that's where we go to the supply and demand because COVID has restricted a lot of travel. And then funds for local governments. About $350 billion has been spent on funding local governments. Paid leave and health insurance has also been spent. And a minimum wage has now been proposed by the president for $15 an hour. So there's many changes that's occurring, and mostly it's to benefit the general public and to help further the vaccination process.
Minimum wages, the proposal is to increase it to $15. Is it in all states or just in a couple of states?
So the minimum wage is for all states. So that's just the bare
Wow.
minimum that's federally allowed by each state. So each state will have a minimum of $15 and they can go over. So the last time I checked, I believe Washington State had the highest minimum wage. And right now, with the minimum wage being in the $10 range, a $15, a $5 raise would be amazing for many, many people
That's
that are affected by
50%
COVID.
increase.
Correct.
That's absolutely
Correct.
massive.
So trillions of dollars are going to be spent in the long term. So this is a very long term plan to boost the economy. So capitalism in the United States is based on different companies that are based in the United States. That is how the United States really gets all their funds, their tax dollars from companies. So companies pay out billions of dollars every year in supporting the economy, and those companies employ US citizens. So the focus on businesses is essential because that is how our capitalist country of the United States is able to continue to run. So any way to support and stimulate people to keep working for these companies and to keep the companies open is the main goal for the United States.
Jess, just to clarify, the increase of the minimum wage, is it something that will be funded by the government or is it the companies who will all increase it by 50%?
So currently, the exact minimum wage in federally is $7.25. The average in the United States is almost in the $10 range. Increasing it to $15 would require the federal government to mandate states to provide that funding for employees. So companies would be paying their employees a minimum of $15 per hour in order to continue to stimulate the economy. So this would be a federal requirement that is pushed upon companies that benefit the general public.
Okay, so it would not be financed by the government or by government debt.
So it would be initially financed due to COVID. So there would be a portion of the stimulus package to help businesses achieve the $15 minimum wage.
Okay, that's huge.
It is major, and that alone would hurt many companies.
That's like an
But
earthquake.
yes, it's a really big deal. There's so many changes. And again, in our lifetime, this is the biggest changes that has occurred. Now, in the United States, the minimum wage was set many years ago, and kids under the age of 12 used to be allowed to work, and a lot of kids weren't able to go to school, especially during the Great Depression. It was very difficult for families to be fed. There was rations that were occurring, and we do not want to go back to that situation. So to avoid that, ensuring that people are getting paid enough to live and to exist in society is the main goal.
It reminds me of what happened in France. I think it was something like 15 years ago. The official working hours were 40 hours per week. And in France, instead of increasing the minimum wage or the salary, they said, no, we're going to decrease the amount of working hours because we want people to have more free time and go more on a holiday so that they can spend more on the beach. And the government has financed this huge, massive program of going from 40 hours work week to 35 hours work week. It cost like billions to the government, like billions.
Yes. Now, that is partly due to the desire to put more money into companies and the government, because when people spend their money, that is what truly keeps the wheel turning. So you want to go out on holiday and break your leg so that you can go to the hospital so that the hospital gets more money, right? That's the whole goal. If everyone's at home sitting down, not spending money, the economy
It's
is
not
not
good for
going to
capitalism.
turn. Correct. So in many third world countries and developing countries, they are struggling because they are funded by the government. And the majority of the money that goes into the government is government owned. So in the United States, land, buildings, companies are owned by people. In other countries that are developing, they're all owned by the government. So the government really has to stimulate themselves and fund themselves instead of pushing it onto the people. So it's a different outlook, and many people across the world are now using a barter system, utilizing Bitcoin because their economy, their dollar is really decreased, the
Yeah, that's a
currency has
stimulus
decreased.
package.
Yes. So in
So
the
if you
United
have
States,
noticed,
trying to avoid that.
there's a very indirect relationship between the timing of the stimulus package in the US that was distributed to all the eligible Americans and the investment in GME, in GameStop, in Bitcoin, because people didn't know what to do with their money. They were stuck at home. A lot of them like started to do online shopping more and more, but a lot of people are not into spending money. They prefer to invest or to make like high risk bets and leveraged trading investments.
Yeah.
And that's how we we got the Bitcoin rising. That's how we got like the GME. That's how we got all the stock market rising.
Yes, that's exactly how. In being in a first world country, being in Europe or being in the United States, that is a benefit where we can sit at home and boost the global economy. And with there being such a high demand to maintain lifestyle, it really boosts those companies that would have a major loss if we didn't have the internet. So the internet has really allowed companies to stay afloat globally, especially with what's going on with the supply for companies, because companies are ordering about 5 times as much supply as the average American or average European. So it's truly just keeping these businesses open versus, actually keeping them in a place of financial stability.
You're working for the US government at the moment. Can you tell us a bit more what's going on for the company supply and how they need to use that stimulus check in order to keep the economy going?
Yes. So working for the government has allowed me to understand how the government works monetarily. So the Department of Commerce, for instance, or different, the Fed, for instance, those buildings house the secrets, I would say, of the United States. So for any of these companies to participate in any relief programs, they have to receive incentive. So many of these companies are receiving anywhere between 10 to 50 million dollars to participate in this rollout of stimulus packages. So for instance, let's call out a grocery company. A grocery company, if they want to maintain the current stimulus package of providing food stamps, which is relief in the United States for low income families to eat and to have groceries. They receive $30 million dollars per year in order to sustain those who are under the poverty line. But on the other side, they're also receiving a guaranteed $300 per month from each individual that is on the program. So many companies are making double the amount of money to participate in these stimulus programs. And that also includes the healthcare industry. Now, not to get too much into politics, but it costs tens of millions of dollars to run for president. And these secret societies invest into the government so that they can fund different politicians because the government doesn't have the funds to run that large of an operation when it comes to running for office. So these investors, they say, okay, if you pass bills that align with my agenda, which ultimately leads to making money, they're all of their agendas is to make money, then we will fund you, Mr. Individual, to run for president. Because individuals commonly don't have $30 million dollars sitting around. That's the reason why they join up with the Democratic Party or the Republican Party so that those parties can fund the individual so that they can run for office. But what differentiates Obama from Joe Schmo candidate? It's because Obama is actually going to go along with and align himself with the agenda of the investors. And many investors in the healthcare industry and different industries globally are investing into the president to ensure that they abide by their agendas. Now, the first company to ever, because I have a background in law, so the first company to start the trend of creating laws to align with their agenda is actually FedEx. So FedEx creates, yes, they actually pass laws and get laws passed to further their agenda. So that started in the dawn of the creation of the United States. So this is business law was created by businesses. And many of these agendas that are occurring when people ask, okay, well, why is the stimulus going to healthcare industries? Why is it not going to, car companies? Why isn't it going to, welfare and actually being able to help the people and building roads? Well, because those companies don't own politics. So the companies that are funding politics, that money is going to get put straight directly back into those companies. So they're getting that money back because they were able to pay for the president to run for office.
Okay, let's talk more about that. I'm recording at the moment a video on how to invest, and one of the things that I see in the video is investing might sound risky, but actually, the financial system, the capitalism system, is using the political system as a hedge to make sure that there will always be growing and that no matter what happens globally or internationally, the political system will always protect the companies, and especially the big listed companies in the S&P 500.
Yes, that is exactly correct. And we want there to be some form of a plunge because that allows companies to get even more money in the future. So if you look at companies, let's just throw out Apple. Let's just throw out
Mm,
Apple. Let's throw out Microsoft. Those companies that took a plunge, if you look at their trends, they're making more money now than ever. They're always on the uptrend if you look at it from a 20-year span. Now, if you're looking at it in a 3-year span or a shorter span, of course, there's more fluctuation. But you can see that despite the jumps up and down, they're on the up and up because they fund many of the government operations. And the government will always protect its businesses because that is
absolutely.
how capitalism is built.
Exactly. And that's why I tell people you should invest. It might look risky in the short term because you see the volatility, but in the long term, it's always on an upward trend. And it's not a coincidence. That's because the financial system is always using the political system to be on that upward trend.
Yes. And it is a small, very small group of people that are mandating the federal interest rates in the United States. So, for those listeners that are not aware of the interest rate that is set, the Federal Open Market Committee is a small group of politicians and Federal Reserve Bank presidents. So, it is a very, very, very small group, and it's about 7 people.
Extremely
And
powerful.
very powerful people, and they set the interest rate. So if the interest rate is high, then that narrows the pool of people that can get approved for, items that require a loan or credit. If the interest rate is low, it opens the pool of people that can get approved for interest rates in loans. So they have complete control over when they want to open and close the market in order to manipulate the system because it is essential to be able to open the market for those. So, for instance, the housing crash that occurred in the 2008 2009 in the United States, the pool was wide open,
Hmm.
allowing so many people to get approved for homes, get approved for cars. But that led to a crash because many of those people couldn't afford to pay the bill. And when the interest rate was lowered, that narrowed the pool. And now we see that it's very difficult to get approved for a car, get approved for a home, because that allows the value of those items to rise. So it's a balancing act because you want to open it up and make your money. And there's an entire algorithm and a lot of smart people like you and I who are running the numbers. And they say, hey, for the next 5 years, we can open the pool. And when it crashes, we'll utilize government relief to make up the difference. We'll narrow the pool again, increase the value of items, and then repeat the cycle. No matter what, it benefits companies, it benefits the economy, and that's really what capitalism is based upon.
You're right. These people are among the most powerful and impactful in the world. Back in the days when I was in the trading floor, I can tell you, everybody was monitoring what were this group of people saying. Like what they were saying before, they tried to predict are they going to increase or lower the interest rate. There are even hedge funds who build the machine learning models. They will analyze all the tweets, all the sentiment of any publication, any interview, anything. So the tone of voice, like when they're doing the speech in live, is it like a positive, is it negative, is it neutral? So that they can predict like just 5 minutes before the rest of the world, are they going to lower or to increase the interest rate at the end of their meetings? And
Yes,
this has impact on the entire economy, like worldwide. Whatever impacts the US impacts the rest of the world.
yes. And with it being such a small pool of individuals, it's 11 total, with 7 of those being public officials. And we just went over When you're a public official, you're an average Joe, right? You don't have millions of dollars to make your own choices. So there's 7 individuals that are completely, they're not the richest of the world. And then we have 5 individuals that are elected, and we don't know who those people truly are. We don't know where they come from. We don't know how much money they really make or what families they come from. But they have more so the power to be able to make more open decisions. So when you have such a small pool of people making a decision for the entire economy, you start to ask yourself, why are these is being made, and who is benefiting from these decisions? Because the average Joe Schmo, the average person is not truly aware of what's occurring in the United States. They're not truly aware of capitalism and how it works, and they don't understand their role, because
It's a
we
very
as the
complex
people,
machine.
correct, we're there just to fund. We're there to keep the wheel spinning. So they will say, "Hey, this home, it's going to cost you 10% more." And people are still going to go and pay 10% more. And or they say, "Hey, it's going to be 10% less." And then you're going to be bankrupt. Okay, then people will still engage in that. The general public will follow the lead of the Federal Open Market Committee. So, and companies also will follow the lead as well, because they're going to benefit. They're going to benefit regardless. And because in the United States, businesses are not people. Businesses are their own entities. So if your business becomes bankrupt, that does not mean the individual is bankrupt. That only means the business is bankrupt. So it allows a level of protection. And if you have multiple businesses and umbrella companies, then one can fall. And that doesn't mean the entire company, the entire entity falls. So many of these companies, they have 50 companies underneath them, and they'll get millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, from those smaller companies that are failing, in order to funnel that money back into the larger company and to rebuild all over again. So even with the destruction of these companies due to COVID, all it does is funnel more money into those companies, and then they can rebuild all over again.
Capitalism always wins.
Capitalism always wins, and that's for now. That's where Bitcoin comes in, because they aren't regulated the way the US dollar is regulated. So it creates another level of trade, and it kind of mixes up the funnel. The money that's coming in, it kind of mixes that money up, and it allows a level of diversity. And it's not irony that the creator of Bitcoin and the creator of this cryptocurrency environment is unknown. That is not irony. And it is also not irony that it's not regulated by the United States.
Jess, do you consider that Bitcoin is part of capitalism?
Bitcoin is definitely part of capitalism, 100%. And many developing countries are utilizing cryptocurrency as a result of their governments being basically completely on the downturn due to COVID. So it allows another way of making money without
Are you talking
having
about
to.
Venezuela and these countries that have hyperinflation?
Yes. So let's put out Venezuela, for instance. Venezuela, their economy is based on the government. So the government funds and owns their economy. And when COVID occurred, it diminished the ability for the economy to continue to run. So many lawyers and doctors and teachers, they no longer have a job. So they're creating new jobs. They're creating barter systems. And because the economy can't support itself, so for instance, they'll go to a grocery store and there's 1 or 2 items on the shelf for the entire store. So they'll go to the store, there's no food. So what do? You're now a lawyer or a doctor that's a baker. And you sell.
For real? Like
Yes, that's
true
exactly what's
story?
happening right now. Yes. They
Ah.
become a baker, and they sell or barter those items, and they utilize cryptocurrency to maintain the economy. Now, who is benefiting from that cryptocurrency? And that's where the United States and other European countries are truly benefiting, because now they get to make money indirectly without having to go into those countries and intervene. Now, back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we'd have to go do a coup d'etat. We'd have to go in there, we'd have to
Hmm.
take over their governments to get any money off of them, to control anything, right? And if you look at the end of World War One, taking over different countries, occupying different countries. Look at World War Two, occupying different countries once the war is over. There's money in that. So United States is one of the only countries that has bases on other in other countries to occupy them, or to generate funds. That's not necessarily as required now with cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency, we can basically occupy different countries financially without having to go in physically to occupy those countries.
Yeah, we moved from a world where the war was mostly military, First World War, Second World War, Cold War, etc., to a global economy where the world is like fighting financially,
Correct.
tax,
Correct.
duty, etc. I mean, we all heard about what Donald Trump did about all the import coming to America, and other countries retaliating and America retaliating, etc., until finding a middle ground.
Correct. So cryptocurrency in general, it's great. I think it's very interesting because it allows people to engage on a more fluid level with the economy. But when it comes to different topics, niche topics that are rarely discussed on occupying countries financially, it allows different institutions to go in and fund that way, instead of having to actually go into the country and set up camp. So if you look at the current deficit, which is it's over $20 trillion for the United States, and we see
So just for people to help visualize what's $1 trillion dollar, if you had 1 trillion bills of just $1 each, you could go around the globe like 3 times.
correct.
This is absolutely massive. I don't know if you can visualize that.
Yes, it's almost like taking the difference between $1 million and $1 trillion is almost the difference between the average American or average citizen and a billionaire. So it is a major difference when it comes to how much money is
Hmm.
being spent, what the true deficit is, and how the deficit actually benefits capitalism, because it allows you to have a reason to fluctuate and open and close the pool. If there was no deficit, would the United States be able to do what they're doing right now? Would they be able to create these stimulus packages? And I would say the answer is no.
Well, no, because most first world economy are addicted to debt. And one of the reasons is it's cheap. And they have also institutionalized that, forcing indirectly banks to hold all the government debt, because they put a lot of requirements in the bank that you need to hold something like $100 billion in liquid assets. And what are liquid assets? Well, there's cash and there are all the government debt, and but everything else is not liquid assets. So banks need to hold like and buy all the government debt, so that governments can print and print more debt when they want.
Correct. So a great way to look at it is, if I am a lender, if I'm a company, if I'm Chase Bank or any other bank, Bank of America, if you take, so say you have a citizen and they put $500 into their bank account. So that $500 isn't just sitting there. It's not going to just sit in the bank. That $500, because we're in an electronic world, is being utilized for a loan. So that loan is now being given out to someone else who needs a loan for whatever reason. And there's an interest rate put on that loan. There's interest on that loan. And that additional portion of what the company is making from that $500, of course, is not the individual's money. They're not going to make that money. The company's going to make that additional money, and they're going to use those funds to continue their business. So there has to be a level of debt in order to create interest. And interest is what
Yes.
allows companies to continue to make money.
And what the government now is doing is they're printing more and more money so that they can finance the stimulus package, etc. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the last figures I've read is that America has printed a total of 13% of the national level of money. Like they have increased the global money in circulation by 13%, which is absolutely massive.
Yes, and that's actually a lower estimate because we're
Oh, is it more?
yes, yes, that's actually a lower estimate. Now, when money is printed in the United States, that's determined by the Fed, the Federal Reserve.
Always the same little group of people who decides the fate of the world.
Correct, correct. And the money is printed, it's sent over to a small amount of offices, cash offices, and then it is distributed to the different banks. And that is how money is printed. So when money is printed, we are in America, in capitalism, we associate with printing money with inflation
Mm-hmm.
because, back in the 1930s, that was a common thing because we still had gold standards, we still had cash, physical cash that was stored in different banks. Now that we're on an electronic system, inflation allows the interest to rise. So when more money is printed, that allows more money to be made. Now, it does not necessarily help on a,
Okay, can you come back on
when you're
that?
just looking at the numbers.
Like printing money is making more money, right?
Correct. So it's just like what we discussed earlier. The more debt that occurs, the more interest that can be set. And that debt isn't being held by individuals, they're being held by companies, by businesses. And if they go under, just that business goes under. And when that business goes under, it allows more money to funnel into the government. So the $1.9 trillion that's been spent on stimulus packages,
Mm-hmm.
that wouldn't exist without going into debt. So you
Absolutely.
have to go into debt to make money.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the flow for all our listeners of creating money. So to create money, correct me if I'm wrong, but government, they would issue like a new national or international debt issuance. For example, they would say we're going to issue like $1 trillion of debt. And then they need to find investors like to buy that debt once they have printed the money. And currently, a lot of the holders of American debt are foreign investors. There's China, there's like Middle East, etc. There's to a certain extent Europe. But most of the American debt is held internationally outside America.
That is correct. And China is one of our biggest partners
Yeah.
in holding debt. So
They love
many
American
people,
bonds.
correct, many people think that America and China are at odds. Yes, on paper, sure. We'll say it all day
On the
long.
appearances.
But government wise, when it comes to how money is transferred and how much debt is owned, China and the United States have a great relationship monetarily.
Yeah. They can't let the other die. We're talking about like trillions of dollars.
Correct. I liken it to a landlord. So say you have a landlord and a tenant. They're at odds,
Hmm.
but that tenant is still paying the landlord every month. So it's a very interesting situation because the way that
And here the
the
tenant is
economy
America and the
works.
landlord is China.
Correct. So we're still in some schematics, the landlord can be China. But
Oh, is it?
if you
I think
look
it's.
at
Can you see it in another way? Because it's America which is depending on China to finance all its government program and pay like every month the interest rate to the debt to China, right?
correct. So let's also do another analogy, a parent to a child.
Hmm.
So if I'm a parent, which I am, and I have a 9-year old, and I can set how much money I give him for allowance. And no matter what, my son can never go out and go get a job to pay me back. He can't do that.
Mm.
Legally, there's no way for him to truly make enough as much as I make as an adult. So I can give him $50 a week and then say, oh, well, you owe me $300. And it doesn't matter how long it takes him. I can set that amount. And there is I would say that there's more of a parent child relationship because honestly, it's set up to create a relationship. It's not really about how much money is being owed. It's just about an exchange and
Mm.
having someone to funnel that money through. And sometimes we have to take a step back and see what is the importance of the relationship. Instead of just looking at the numbers, why is that relationship important? Why do we need China?
Hmm.
Why do we need other countries to own the US debt?
And in that second analogy, your son is America and you're China. Always giving more
Correct.
money to your
Correct.
son, even if he can't
Correct.
repay you.
Correct. So the relationship is essential. And that's where we're going, especially with electronics and moving into cryptocurrency and moving into a more hostile economic environment. Relationships is the only thing that matters now, not necessarily how much money is being lost or how much money is being made. We are getting to a place in the world globally where if you're part of the small niche group, you're going to make money at the end of the day. You're going to benefit no matter how much money is lost or how much money is made.
If you're on the bright side of capitalism, because I think we should mention that capitalism is great for people who understand how it works. Because they can just sit, do nothing, put their money to the capitalism system, and the money will make money by itself. However, people who are on the wrong side, those who are just consumers, they keep spending, they are on credit card debt. These are the ones who are financially squeezed and who are actually feeding the bright side of capitalism.
Correct. So it's always a double side, right? There's always a beneficial side and a dark side, a light side and a dark side, right? And being in this economy, anyone can invest.
Mm.
Anyone. It doesn't matter who you are. Sometimes it doesn't matter where you live, just depending on what you're trying to invest in. And so it's essential to take advantage of that because 50, 60 years ago, you couldn't do that. 80 years ago, an average person couldn't just invest freely and make gains. So many years ago, people couldn't just open businesses, open companies, and be part of the relief, the stimulus package. It was very, very, very niche. So now you can be a business owner. You can get relief just like the large businesses when the economy crashes. And you can be a landlord if you want. You can own a car business if you want. You can be a supplier if you want. You can be an Amazon reseller or supplier if you want. So this is a great time in history to where anyone can get a piece of the pie.
I would even add, on top of everything you said, that everyone should now be part of the bright side of capitalism. Because now the time of hyperinflation is coming. And what's happening is for people who are already shareholders, they own whatever, one share of Tesla, Apple, the S&P 500. By doing just nothing, their assets are growing over time. They're getting richer and richer doing just nothing because that's what's happening in inflation and when the capitalism system is working. But those who are not part of the system, they're only consumers and they haven't invested, the only thing that they will see is the inflation. And the inflation is about to be brutal. Even when there are good news, such as we're going to increase the minimum wage by 50%. It sounds like a great news, but what's the second order effect of that? Hyperinflation. It means that all goods and services will be much more expensive because of the rising cost of the labor. And it's not the income that will catch up with with the cost of life. It just never happens. The only thing that can catch up with the speed of inflation are stocks, investments. This is where actually the money is going. So companies will sell more. They will sell at a higher price, like goods are more expensive. On one hand, their supply is also increasing in prices, but they will pass that price to the consumer. So they will always have, at very least, constant profit, but usually increasing profit, increasing margin. And if the salaries are not going at the same pace, well, where does the difference go? It goes into the retained earnings of the company. They make more money. So during the inflation, never wait for the general income to catch up. It's always lagging behind. The only way to face inflation is to hold assets, to be part of the bright side of capitalism.
Yes, that's exactly correct. And any advice that I can give to the listeners is invest and diversify your investment. Don't just put it all into one stream. Diversify. Diversify, diversify, diversify. So if you are debating between how you want to invest, don't. Diversify. And that is what we can do because there is so many different options now, so many different streams of revenue. And it is reported currently that a retirement plan from working 30, you know, 40 years is less valuable than a 30, 40-year investment. So you really want to invest because you're going to make more money investing after 30 and 40 years than you are from just going to working for one employer or two employers. So it's essential to start now. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what level of knowledge you have. Investment is really where we're going into the future. So,
Yeah, and it works because everything that we explained, capitalism is always using the political system to win at the end of the day.
that's correct, Sam.
Jess, are you investing personally?
Yes, I am.
Great. When did you start to invest? When did you learn about all of that? Because a lot of people they're not yet familiar with all the how the economy is working, how like the stock market and how is it connected between macroeconomic and stock market. And it's quite intimidating to get started when you don't know what you don't know, when you see like so much information. So how did you get started? How did you learn about all of that?
Great question. So, I started investing at the age of 24. So as soon as I graduated from college and started working, I decided to start investing. The first thing I did was talk to my employer, find out how can I invest. And many employers allow you to invest into their companies, and they also allow you to have any kind of education that you need. They will educate you on how to invest with their options.
That's
So that's where
great.
I started with the company that I worked with. And then from there, I started Googling how to invest, my own personal dollars. And not to plug anyone, but you can do Acorns. That's a good start. Charles Schwab. There's so many different options where you can start investing, and they do it all for you. So if you want to dedicate $50 a month, $200 a month, whatever extra you have, you can start there and they will actually do it for you. And then so once you start there with having a company do it for you, then from there you can start really doing it for yourself. Once you start observing. Now you never have to get past that point of investing on your own. You don't have to. And the Motley Fool is very good for helping you if once you get to the point of wanting to know who to invest in, where to invest, it's good to start with them as well. Very, very good. So I would say the steps in progression is start with your employer, then move on to companies that will invest for you. And then the last step is, of course, investing on your own and finding your own companies to invest in.
It's so great that your employer was actually encouraging you and allowing you to invest in the company.
It was actually unheard of. They send out emails and complete dead silence, and no one really talks about it. I just went on my own and decided to take that initiative. Now, employers provide it, but Do they really want every employee to be investing? Do they really want everyone to have a piece of the pie? I would say it more so leans towards a small amount of employees that take that time. But for our listeners, now they're part of that. Now they're part of that small group. And they can go through their employers. Even if you work for a restaurant, they will help with helping you on investing. So it's important to ask your employer instead of just waiting for them to tell you, because they're not. That's a big point. They're not going to tell you.
It's sad that we don't learn the financial education at university, but at least there are a lot of companies which try to help people and do something about it. So I don't
Yes.
know if all employers want their employees to be investing and hold share in the company. I can't speak on behalf of all of them. For sure, I've worked with many companies that didn't have like any plan for employee shareholder. I just can tell that I want all my employees at Nova Money to be shareholder because we're all building something all together. And traditionally, it's only like those who hold the capital that get the biggest upside, and they eventually become millionaire and billionaire. Whereas it's everybody's little contribution and craftsmanship that actually make a company successful. And I really like the idea that anyone who is committed to the company, like anybody who's full-time employed, should own, even if it's just a small portion of the company. At least it shows that they will get the upside when the company grows and makes more profit.
That's correct. And I'm so glad of what you're doing as well to contribute to that, because many people who work for their employers for 20 years never invest and they don't
It's
know.
sad.
Yes, it's a common thing. So for all the listeners out there, please ask your employers, go out and join up online. There's so many different resources, and that is a great place to start. And many of these small companies that invest for you, I can personally vouch that it is very comparable to being a government employee or a large company employee. They're very competitive. So it's not like you're getting a smaller slice of the pie. They really have opened up very many opportunities for citizens to be able to go out and start investing.
And again, it's a lack of financial education. But what people don't know is the salary is the worst type of income. It's the highest taxed. It's the one that can't scale because if you want to earn more, you need to work more, but you can't just work 2 times or 3 times more. You need to sleep, you need to eat. Capital is actually the best type of income. And the way you do it is by investing, by like owning a part of the company that you're contributing to its success. So maybe if your employer doesn't want to help you or doesn't look like very keen on that, maybe try to find like a better employer. I think that should be something that people assess when they're looking for a career and a place to grow, not just look at the cash salary that they offer, but also the other financial incentives such as like company ownership, investment, education.
Correct. And that's a great point, because I have worked for private companies and for the government as well. And when you are working for the government in the United States, you're going to pay more money. You're going to pay the highest amount that there is to pay.
In taxes,
So, not just in taxes, but in your healthcare plan, it's going to be the most expensive, because companies are responsible for negotiating healthcare packages,
hmm,
negotiating, different levels of how they want to take on taxes. So, some companies, for instance, there is a tax that's placed on companies for employees. So the amount of employees that they have is the amount of tax that they have to pay. Some companies, for instance, say I get an offer to make $40,000 a year. Some companies, that same 40,000, they will lower it to 35 so that they can make up for the 5,000 they have to pay in taxes to have you as an employee. So it's important to just make sure that you are making appropriate comparisons when you are on the job hunt, because if you're getting a lower salary, but you're getting all these additional benefits, that company is more so trying to look out for themselves because they want to make sure that they're not paying as much in taxes, that in the benefits that they're offering aren't necessarily as high as other companies or as it really truly could be. So you want to make sure that you're actually getting the bang for your buck, and exactly what you said, Sam, making sure that you're really considering all the additional benefits, not just salary.
Yeah, and it's always the capital in the end that will be like your biggest contribution into your wealth. Let's look at just look at the billionaires during the COVID. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, even Bill Gates. They all became so much richer during the COVID crisis.
Yes, and to mention Elon Musk, he used to live in California, and taxes are insanely high in California. So he moved out of state so that he can pay less taxes. And that's very essential. I'm looking to where does your company reside? Where do they reside? Because that's going to really base how much state taxes they pay. So that's a big factor. And then just seeing, Elon Musk purchase a tiny house and just trying to avoid as paying as much taxes as possible. But if you look, your model for your CEO is how they're going to treat you as an employee. So if your CEO is trying to save as much as possible in taxes, then they might be shaving down your ability to make as much income or get as many benefits as you could. So because each company in the United States have to negotiate their packages and negotiate with different entities and different companies on how they want to make their payments and how much they pay, and because they have some flexibility on taxes and how they want to make up for that, you really have to analyze each company by company. You cannot just make an assumption that the how much you pay for healthcare is the same across the board. And what you're saying for your position, your salary is going to be your salary no matter what. That is an important distinction to make, especially in the United States.
Good. Jessica, thank you so much for bringing us some light on what's going on currently in our economy. Well, in the US economy, but as we all know, America is impacting the entire world.
Yes, thank you so much for your time. It's so exciting to talk and to discuss this because this isn't very frequently discussed. And, it takes a lot to speak, my truth and to share my experiences, especially as a young millennial working in finance and working for the government. So I'm really excited to have been on the show and just to have this discussion today.
Yes, and I really appreciate that because I know that very few people actually have exposure to how economy and how capitalism is working behind the scene. And when people don't have like this information, they don't know what's going on. They don't know what are the right financial decisions to make for their life and their future. So I'm super glad to have like guests like you who can spread their knowledge and financial education with everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
All the best, Jessica. Cheers. Thank you for listening. I hope you found this episode enjoyable, inspiring, and educational. In this era of instant gratification, it is more important than ever to train our delayed gratification muscle. So keep learning, keep improving by 1% every day. You may not see the result right now, but this is a secret of all the successful people I've met. Please help me spread financial education by sharing this podcast with your friends and community. I would love it if you could also leave us a review. It really helps the show. Now, I would like you to forget about all the advertising that is being pushed to us on a daily basis and think about your personal financial goals. What do you really want to achieve with your money? If you have financial objectives, then check out the Nova Money app. Nova is an AI that will show you how to set financial goals and how to achieve them. A plan is only useful if you can follow it. That's why Nova will send you daily motivational messages to give you the strength to ignore the daily temptations of spending money and stay focused on your goals. Like other budgeting apps, Nova connects all your bank accounts in one place to give you the full picture. The difference is that the Nova AI will do all the budgeting and tracking for you. The second difference is that unlike many free personal finance apps, we don't sell users data. All your data is encrypted and will remain completely private. Make sure that you're investing in your financial education. Make sure that you're building your financial freedom. And I'll speak to you in the next episode.